Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking about every single healer when it comes to Midnight Beta. Over the last couple of weeks I spent a lot of my time testing every single healer when it comes to that Mythic Plus content. I tested the first beta build, again the second beta build just dropped this week. I retested all of the healers again, and we'll talk about the gameplay, a little bit about the power. Don't get hung up on the power of healers this early in the beta, that can change every single week, but let's go and get started. A little bit background about how I test each healer. The first beta build, we chose Algard Academy, and I tested every single healer doing that dungeon, and in this beta build I chose Mycerius Caverns, which is a new Mythic Plus dungeon that honestly was pretty difficult to test because first of all it is new, not everyone knows the mechanics. The mechanics are pretty punishing. If you don't know it, you're probably going to die on several of the bosses, and there is a lot of HPS checks, which gave me a decent idea of the power levels of healers right now. And of course you have to remember, I've been testing multiple different builds. There's a lot of things that I haven't tested in terms of some of the hero builds. I will be updating videos, and of course if you enjoy this type of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out in order to do more of these videos. I also have to mention that we were using as similar gear as possible. We were doing the same key levels, we were using the same trinkets and all those things to keep everything somewhat fair. So let's go and get started. So let's start off with our first heal, and that's going to be Restoration Druid. And honestly, Resto has been a blast to test Mythic Plus, both week 1 and week 2 right now. Even though Resto Druid received nerfs, it is a powerhouse of a healer, and we'll talk about the power of healers at the end of the video. I'll do a bit of a tier list, but in terms of some of the gameplay changes, you don't have double life blooms anymore. Your apex talents are revolved around your life bloom, so you need to have a good uptime of life bloom, and the person that has your life bloom, they're most likely going to be safe. You can also look at some of the new talents like life trading, which means that you no longer have to micromanage a fluorescence because it's going to be spawning under the person who has life bloom. You also have to look at the fact that Grove Guardians are going to be procced by pressing your Swift Mint or Wild Growth. You also look at Power of the Archdruid synchronizing with Soul of the Forest, and then a new talent, Nature's Bounty, which synchronizes with regrowth. At the end of the day, the healing breakdown for Resto Druid in Mythic Plus content is, if you're looking at just the healing breakdown, it's all regrowths. You're basically doing all the little things to empower your regrowths, and regrowths feel absolutely insane, especially if you have a lot of the mastery stacks going and things like that. And honestly, I don't think it's really all that balanced right now, because when I compare it to a lot of other healers, Resto Druid can do so much healing without pressing cooldowns, which honestly is comparable to some other healers who are using all of their cooldowns. So Resto Druid still has that regrowth power gameplay, and some people are going to hate it, some people are going to love it. I know there is a population of Resto Druids who would like to see a shift away from that regrowth, maybe taking away some of the power from that regrowth and placing it into some of your HUDs, but how do you balance that when it comes to raiding content? And I guess Blizzard didn't want to take that challenge. Again, if you like that kind of gameplay, Resto Druid is absolutely banger. I've been trying out Wildstalker. You have to remember that a lot of the Season 3 tier sets are being somewhat incorporated into the hero builds for a lot of the healers, and Resto Druid is not an exception to that. Overall, I think Druid was relatively fun to play because first of all, you might have less things to do in terms of you don't have double life bloom, you might not have a fluorescence to manage. There's been some of the talents being synchronized to each other, and kitty weaving is still a big skill expression that Resto Druid can have, especially depending on the hero build you're playing. So I had fun with Resto Druid because I was able to kitty weave when there wasn't a lot of going on, and honestly Resto Druid was able to meet all of the healing checks that are needed. It was an absolute beast, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. And now let's talk about Restoration Shaman. In terms of your apex talents, Riptide has a chance to proc you Stormstream Totem, which is another totem that you can press that's going to synergize differently based on which hero build you're using. And I'm not a huge fan of RNG talents, and we'll talk about that maybe later on, but outside of that, I tried out multiple different builds. I feel like Resto Shaman can have multiple builds that can do decently well in Mythic Plus content. First of all, I tried out Totemic, I tried out Fireseer as well, I tried out multiple different talents. I didn't get to try out Totemic Downpour, which I think could be pretty good, especially in those melee comps. I just could not get a melee comp. I had a lot of or bunch of range players standing all over the place. They're not really making use of my Surging Totem, so I didn't really get to test that out. But I'm not sure which build was my favorite. I tried Totemic and Fireseer. I'm not sure which one was the best, right? I need to test a little bit more. I'm not sure what it's going to be like when Midnight releases, but I think both of them were playable and you can still have a good time. I also like the rework to Ascendance, because if you press Ascendance and you press Riptide, your next Chain Heal or Healing Wave is going to be instant cast. Also, Chain Heal and Healing Wave are going to apply Riptide on those targets, and you can stack this buff up. And having instant cast Chain Heals or Healing Waves felt really nice, because Resto Shaman, depending on the hero build, can somewhat feel sluggish. So instant cast abilities felt, again, a nice little change of pace. And of course, your tier set is going to be based on Unleash Life, and now empowers multiple abilities. It also makes your Unleash Life initial heal stronger, so it can actually be used for spot healing. And it's up to you to decide how you're going to use those two empowered Unleash Life abilities, or which abilities you're going to empower. I do think Shaman has multiple builds that you can play in Mythic Plus content. I'm not sure which is going to be the best one. I did miss something like Cloudburst Totem, but I know a lot of Resto Shamans are not a huge fan of Cloudburst Totem, so I think a lot of people might disagree with me. But overall, Resto Shaman felt okay. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst in terms of the power. In terms of the gameplay, some people are going to dislike some of the removal or the simplification of Resto Shaman. Again, the latest changes that happen in this build for this healer, Coalescing Water change, is really nice because it now works with Healing Wave, and I thought that was pretty good. They did nerf some of the aspects of Fireseer and some of the aspects of Totemic. We'll have to see how Chain Heal is going to work out, because based on this week's changes, it's very clear Blizzard is trying to balance Chain Heal, and historically that balancing battle of Chain Heal has been pretty hard to do. It's either something that you want to constantly press or something that you never press. So we'll see if Blizzard is going to figure it out, but I think Shaman was okay. Let me know how you feel about the gameplay aspects. So now let's talk about Preservation Evoker, and honestly it was kind of fun to test out, because I was testing a lot of Flame Shaper in Mythic Plus, because Flame Shaper has been reworked completely. You don't have Engulf, instead you just have 2 Dream Breaths and 2 Fire Breaths, and Dream Breath is a banger in terms of your overall healing and all that. I did try out Chrono Warden in the first beta build, and I still need to retest it a bit more, but I had a lot of fun with Flame Shaper. Now keep in mind, a lot of people might look at Preservation Evoker, Spirit Bloom is gone, but is it really gone? It's basically baked into your Apex talent, Meritor's Blessing, which basically has an RNG way of proccing it, or a guaranteed way of proccing it by using Dream Breath. Flame Shaper has 2 Dream Breaths. You see where I'm getting here? Multiple ways of proccing the Apex talent, which basically turns your next reversion into a instant cast Spirit Bloom or something similar of that sort. And I had fun playing with this. Now, there are a couple of things that I'm still missing. For example, you cannot echo your life binds, and I was missing that kind of gameplay component. Some people might find it a little bit, it requires too much setup and things like that, but I actually kind of wish it was still there. And again, I'd love to know your opinion on this. In terms of your tier set, in terms of Verdant Embrace, honestly, Verdant Embrace slaps. You have a tier set based around Verdant Embrace, and I was running this Dream talent, which means that I don't have to jump to the target when I'm pressing my Verdant Embrace, which was such a nice quality of life. So that was a good way of dealing with situations where, oh crap, this person is about to die, I have my Verdant Embrace, I'm not going to jump to them. Instead, I'm just going to provide a bunch of healing, and they probably should be fine by this time. But as I mentioned, I didn't get to test out Chrono Warden as much in this beta build, because I did test it out in beta build 1, and I just had such a good time with Flame Shaper. I just kept on testing with Flame Shaper, and I had a lot of fun. You have to remember, Dream Breath is also 40 yards to try and make it easier for you. Overall, if you enjoyed Pres Evoker, it'll be interesting to try out something different, because historically speaking, a lot of the times you would play Flame Shaper in raids, or you would play Chrono Warden in Mythic Plus, with some exceptions. And I think Midnight might actually turn that around or change it up a little bit. And now let's talk about Holy Paladin. And I have to mention before I do this section, there's a lot of bugs for a lot of the healers out there in beta, and Holy Paladin is no exception. One of the big bugs is Divine Toll. It doesn't really work. So I spend a lot of my testing when it comes to Mythic Plus with Lightsmith, because first of all, there is a lot of synergy with Lightsmith and Judgment, and Blizzard is pushing this gameplay with Judgment and Holy Shock a lot because they removed Crusader Strike. Now, it's not really removed, because if you spec into melee wings, your melee wings get replaced by Crusader Strike. So I was running this build with Crusader Smite, which means that my Holy Shock reduces the cooldown of Judgment, so that means I can use Judgments more often. I can use Holy Shock to reduce the cooldown of Judgment. I can use, how do I say, holy power spenders like Shield of the Righteous, which also going to reduce the cooldown of Holy Shock, which means I can use more Holy Shocks, which means I can use more Judgments. So why do I care about Judgment that much? Because if you play Lightsmith, Judgment critical strikes are going to proc things like Hammer and Anvil, and you also have a spec 3 talent called the Fear Legacy, which means your Judgment critical strikes going to make your next Word of Glory activate Light of Dawn. So there is a bunch of incidental kind of healing that you can do by just using Judgment, and there's multiple ways to reduce the cooldown of Judgment. Oh, and did I forget, if you have Crusader Smite and you have melee wings, using Crusader Strike is also going to reduce the cooldown of Holy Shock, which therefore can give me more judgments because Holy Shock reduces judgment cooldown. Okay, I need to take a breather. And on top of that, Blizzard is also pushing this gameplay even more because in this beta build, as I mentioned, they are further reducing the cooldown of Holy Shock and Judgment. And if you look at the Apex talents, it's honestly like another beacon that kind of jumps around to some of the lower HP targets. It's somewhat passive, you can't really control it, so you can see it on your frames and you can see that this person has your Apex talent on them and all those things. So based on my testing, again, my Ceres Caverns, we did this dungeon on every single healer. There is a decent amount of healing requirements here, but for a lot of the dungeon, I was playing Lightsmith, so my kind of rotation of Judgment, Holy Shock, Holy Power Spenders, and Holy Armaments was good enough to cover a lot of the healing checks. But once shit hits the fan and you might have to hardcast Holy Light, I'm not sure if it feels all that great. I'm not sure if it's enough also. I guess it just really depends on the key level you're doing and what kind of healing requirements you have. If I didn't have to hardcast many abilities, my mana was actually insanely good. I spent a couple of dungeons with like 90% mana the whole dungeon and I never had to drink. But as I mentioned, if shit hits the fan, if you have to do a bit more of that hardcasting, Holy Light and all those things, your mana can dip quite fast. So overall, I want to test out Herald of the Sun in the future. I want them to fix Divine Toll so I can try that out a bit more. Let me know how you feel about this shift of Holy Paladin. Now let's talk about Mistweaver Monk, and honestly I spent a decent amount of time testing Mistweaver Monk and a bunch of different builds because I feel there's a bunch of different builds that could be used in Mythic Plus content, and there's been some substantial changes to happen in this week's beta build. So first of all, Mistweaver Monk no longer has a Jade Fire Stomp, and I was thinking about this and I'm happy it's gone. You know why? Because testing these dungeons and not having this positional requirement that Jade Fire Stomp kind of placed upon you was a breath of fresh air. So I'm happy about this change. In terms of Apex talents, it honestly follows the same exact mentality that Preservation Evoker Apex talents follow. Mistweaver Monk has Apex talents that has a random chance of proccing and then a guaranteed chance of proccing by using Thunder Focus T, which I feel they could have copied for other healers as well, because there's a couple of healers that have these random procs and I just don't like random procs when it comes to healing. But my testing of Mistweaver Monk was very, very different because in week 1 of beta build, I was testing Master of Harmony. Now, Conduit of the Celestial, actually Mistweaver Monk has probably the most bugs out of all the classes out there. It's riddled with bugs. So I was testing Master of Harmony in the first week because Conduit of Celestial was bugged a lot, and I just wanted to check out Master of Harmony, and I was running that Shalon's Gift build. Now, Shalon's Gift replaces Vivify, and then you have options of having a stronger single target heal or having more AoE, and Emperor's Favor was a talent that was absolutely busted because you could empower it by using your Mana Tea. So you could empower it and then you could have an insane single target healing very often. That talent was new. It went from 150% to 20%. So this meant I wanted to try out some new builds. I wanted to try out Conduit of the Celestial because I was hoping some of the bugs were fixed. I was trying out, again, different talents, some of the talents that might be a little bit unorthodox in order to see what worked best. I tried out Master Harmony in this week and I wasn't a huge fan. Honestly, they reworked Master Harmony also in terms of coalescence, and I'm not sure how to feel about that, but I tried out Conduit and I had a very decent time. First of all, Conduit gives you an additional cooldown, so I was able to do these dungeons and I had at my disposal, I had Conduit cooldown, I had my Red Crate, I had my Thunder Focus Tea, because you have to remember Thunder Focus Tea procs your Apex talents, and then I had my Revival. And I was able to cycle through these cooldowns. Oh, and I almost forgot, when running Shalon's Gift and running Tranquil Tea and using your Mana Tea to stack up and empower your Shalon's Gift was also a nice addition to that toolkit. And in terms of the builds, I was running that melee build. I was running Jadefire Teachings, I was running Wave the Crane. I'm sure there might be some other builds that could be usable in Mythic Plus and things like that, but I really enjoyed that melee build. Not having Jadefire Stomp was more appealing than I initially anticipated, and I feel like we'll have to see how the tuning is gonna go, but I feel like if you really enjoy that melee, or you want to be a melee healer, or you enjoy being in that melee space, honestly, Mistweaver is probably the main answer for you. And even though a lot of the healers received simplification, and Mistweaver also received simplification, we talked about the removal of Jadefire Stomp, there's been some quality of life improvements to your cooldowns and all those things, I still think this healer has a lot of skill ceiling attached to them. So if you're scared about healers feeling too easy, again, Mistweaver might be a decent choice. So now let's talk about Discipline Priest. And Discipline Priest received quite a few changes in this beta build. And again, I got to retest every single healer. I was playing my Discipline Priest or Oracle Discipline Priest a lot. I played a little bit of Void Weaver as well. And based on my testing so far, I probably preferred Oracle a little bit more because it's just easier to play. I'm more familiar with it and it just has these big shields and I really like these big shields. I'm sure you can make both builds work depending on the talent build you're running, depending on how you're used to it and all those things. But in terms of some of the big changes for Discipline Priest, you have to look at, again, Oracle in terms of premonitions. Premonitions in terms of the cycling ability, they're no longer there. Instead, you get an additional charge of penance. And that's pretty good because penance has nice synchronization with your Apex talent in terms of Void Shield, in terms of penance, having a chance of proccing your next shield into a Void Shield, and that Void Shield is going to feel pretty good when it procs. Again, it is random, but it has a high chance of doing it. On top of that, some of the talents like Wheel and Woe no longer has the Smite component attached to it. So if you're an Oracle, Discipline Priest, and Joy in the War Within, you know exactly what that means. A lot of times you would press your penance, you'll get Wheel and Woe stacks, and you want to use it on your shield, but your shield might be on cooldown, and you might look at pressing Smite, but you can't really press Smite because that's going to consume Wheel and Woe, and then you are stuck in this limbo moment where you would have to press something else. You no longer have to do that because Wheel and Woe doesn't have Smite to it. So when playing Oracle Discipline Priest in Midnight and Mythic Plus, there is a lot of that penance into shield type of gameplay. I'm not sure how to feel about the loss of premonitions because I remember doing Candle King in the War Within as a Discipline Priest, cycling through my premonitions, making sure I have enough HPS to kill Candle King on a high Mythic Plus key level, and that felt really rewarding. But on the other side, premonitions can sometimes feel a little bit clunky. So I really want to know your opinion. Are you happy about the fact that premonitions are gone for Oracle? In terms of what happened in this week's beta build, they attach additional components to Evangelism. You can now pick talents like Archangel or Mindbender in order to add additional components to Evangelism without actually giving you additional cooldown to press, which I thought was relatively interesting. It might differ depending on which build you're playing. I was trying out a different build for Void Weaver, I was trying out a different build for Oracle. And like I said, I feel like you can play both of them. I do have to mention that the mana management is a little bit iffy when you compare it to some of the other healers out there, especially considering the fact that I have to drink or sit down and get mana up, even though if I'm doing my base rotation and nothing too crazy. And I think Blizzard should really address that because I don't think any healer likes to drink between pulls. And now let's talk about Holy Priest. Now, I didn't get to test Holy Priest as much as I liked in terms of some of the hero builds. I mainly focus on Oracle because Oracle, again, premonitions in terms of cycling abilities is no longer there, but now you get multiple charges or additional charge of Prayer of Mending, and your Apex talents have a nice synergy with Prayer of Mending. I'm also not quite certain what the best talent build is going to be for Holy Priest when it comes to that Mythic Plus content, so I tried out a bunch of different options. I did try out talents like Ultimate Serenity, which replaces Sanctify and enhances Serenity, which means you have one less button to press. Again, you don't have heal anymore, so there's a lot of emphasis on flash heal. There's a lot of your instant cast abilities that are also gone. I'm also not quite sure where Prayer of Healing is going to land. In this build, they did try to buff it further. I think throughout the whole inception of Prayer of Healing, Blizzard has made an insane amount of tuning options to try and make Prayer of Healing more usable. I need to try that out a bit more. Some of the builds that I was running were not using Prayer of Healing, so there is more testing to be needed for Holy Priest, but I was running a very simplistic build where a lot of my healing was just coming from Flash Heal, Serenity, Prayer of Mending type of rotation. But as I said, there needs to be further testing for Holy Priest. I need to test out Archon a bit more, but based on my early expectations here, I can tell you right now that Holy Priest felt a little bit undertuned based on the builds that I was running, and if I were to compare Holy Priest to Resto Druid, there's no comparison. It's night and day in terms of power, but power can change from week to week. But I do think that Blizzard has or had issues in terms of balancing some of the specs when it comes to Mythic Plus content and when it comes to raiding. And I hope that Blizzard is going to do a bit of a better job when it comes to Holy Priest, because they've been a little bit lower when it comes to that Mythic Plus performance for a very long time now. I'm not saying you can't do Mythic Plus dungeons as a Holy Priest, you absolutely can. But I feel like the priority has not been that Mythic Plus content when it comes to Holy and I'm hoping that's going to shift. And now for a quick power ranking for this beta build. Now do not get hung up on power because tuning is ongoing. Healers are shifting from one week to another. The best healer right now might be the worst healer next week, who knows. So just keep that in mind. And this is not looking at utility, it's not looking at raid buffs, it's just looking at how easy it was for me to heal a dungeon with any given of these healer specs. And we're going to start off with the first healer in that OP section. That's going to be Restoration Druid. No surprise here. This healer is playing a different game compared to other healers. The amount of power that you have with regrowths. Get your HOTS out and you can just... Those regrowths are going to feel so powerful. Other healers cannot match that healing even when they pop cooldowns. That's the level of OP that we have with Resto Druid. This is testing with Wildstalker right now. We talked about the simplification in terms of gameplay. The emphasis is still there on regrowth and buffing regrowth, and you can carry your group as Resto Druid. And again, if the beta would go live the way that it is right now, I would bet everything that I have that every single Mythic Plus pusher would be playing Restoration Druid. And now I'm going to do something different. I'm going to place every other healer in that decent category, and I'm going to go from there. And that is to showcase the fact that there is only, in my eyes, two really clear outliers. Every other healer in terms of power felt pretty close to each other, and you could do that key and you could still have a good time and all of those things. Resto Druid was the one that felt really powerful when compared to all the other healers, and Holy Priest felt a little undertuned when compared to all the rest. And I did talk about Holy Priest in the Holy Priest section. I do need to test out more different builds. I need to test out Archon a bit more, but overall, it felt like it was reaching its limit a little bit sooner than some of the others, and I would like to see more buffs, or Blizzard should have a better way of trying to balance certain healers when it comes to Mythic Plus and when it comes to raiding, because there just always seems to be a case where certain healer is better in Mythic Plus and certain healer is better in raids, and it's just always like this. Resto Druid is another example of a healer that just feels better in Mythic Plus than it feels in raids. So we'll see if that's going to change, but maybe that's what having different niches is all about, and maybe that's fine, and I would love to know your opinion on this. Now, in terms of some of the changes that I could do, now, based on week 1 beta build, Mistweaver Monk would definitely be higher because you had the Shadow's Gift, Emperor's Favor interaction, and it gave you insane spot healing. That talent in terms of Emperor's Favor was absolutely nuked this week. And I could still place Mistweaver Monk in that grade section. I could probably place Preservation of Evoker here if I was extremely nitpicky. But the fact is that the difference wasn't all that huge. So I'm just going to be very general here and just place them back in that decent section. I know there might be some differences between them, but I don't think it's significant enough yet. And remember, I can do a lot more testing. I didn't get to test every single hero build yet. I got to test out Wildstalker first of Druid because it was so OP. I just didn't see the reason to test out Keeper because Druid is playing another game. Mistweaver Monk, I was actually trying out Master of Harmony in week 1. In week 2, I was trying out Conduit of the Celestial. I talked about the cooldown rotation that I was doing in the Mistweaver section. Preservation of Evoker, I focused on Flame Shaper because the double Dream Breads and the way that they interact with your Apex talents and all those. In terms of Resto Shaman, I played Totemic, I played Farseer. I didn't get to play Totemic Downpour build, which I think could be interesting in those melee comps. I just could not get a melee comp to try it out. In terms of Discipline Priest, I was trying a lot of the Oracle because for me, it's relatively simple to play. I'm very used to it. I like big shields, but I think you can also make Void Weaver work, especially if you're more familiar with Discipline Priest than me. And in terms of Holy Paladin, I was mainly testing Lightsmith because there's so much synergy with that Judgment. And Blizzard is really pushing that Judgment, Holy Shock, Holy Power Spender type of gameplay. And in terms of Holy Priest, I was mainly testing Oracle again because you get multiple charges of Prayer Mending, and Prayer Mending has a good interaction with your Apex talents. So there's a lot of things that I need to retest again. There's a lot of the healers that have insane amount of bugs. I am looking at Mistweaver, I am looking at Holy Paladin. There's probably other healers that have a bunch of other ones. It's very buggy state for some healers in general. So I'm waiting for those bug fixes. For a lot of the players out there who might be scared about the loss of complexity. So a lot of the healers got simplification, but I still think there are a couple of healers who have a lot of skill expression. For example, I'm talking about Resto Druid. Resto Druid healing toolkit has been limited to some way, but you still have to remember with Wildstalker that I was testing, I was doing kitty weaving. It actually felt really nice to optimize my healing, and then when I don't have a lot of things to do, I'll go into my kitty weaving and have that skill ceiling opened up for me. In terms of other healers, Mistweaver Monk, again, I was playing that melee build, I was playing Wave the Crane, I was playing Jadefire, Teachings and all those things, and I really enjoy that melee gameplay. And I do think there is a lot of skill ceiling to it as well if you want to optimize absolutely everything about this. I'm not sure which build is going to be the best, but I had fun testing with Mistweaver, and I think the skill ceiling is there. Preservation Evoker lost some of its skill ceiling because you can't really echo your life bind anymore, you don't have Emerald Communion, but Echo is probably one of the most versatile abilities in there, and I still think you have a lot of decision making that you can do. Stasis is still there and things like that, so there are healers that still retained a lot or some of that complexity that might be interesting to some others, and there's a lot of healers who became more streamlined, so pick your poison. And again guys, remember, do not get hung up on power. Power changes every single week, but if you like this content, it takes me ages to edit and put together and test. It really helps out the channel. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.